It's 5 lights out and the Mexican Grand Prix is underway. Dungeon once again getting an incredible launch off the line, getting ahead of Moto, who started from pole position. But now it's a long run down into turn 1. The drivers are going to need to judge their braking point carefully as the grip is constantly changing in these rainy conditions. But coming into turn 1, Dungeon manages to maintain his lead, but no, it's actually Heya who's had an incredible few opening corners now, getting past both the drivers already, coming onto the first DRS straight. But now coming into turn 4, Heya managing to maintain P1, but Dungeon is able to carry the speed through the chicane. And now into turn 6, both the drivers are side by side with each other on the exit, and now coming into this S's of Sector 2, they are neck and neck with each other, but Heya just about managing to get ahead of Dungeon. And we also have to take a look at the Sauber of Speed, trying to get ahead of the Ferrari of Moto and continue his podium streak from Russia last weekend. But now coming into the stadium section, Heya has actually managed to make a 2/10 gap through there, and he's extending that gap in this final sector here. But Speed has managed to get ahead of both the Ferraris, but Heya actually goes straight on into the wall, and he's actually got damage. He's lost his front wing there, but we're going to see in a replay how he managed to do that. Now as we see him, he comes into the penultimate corner, and he just couldn't turn the car. I think that might have been a hardware issue, but yeah, the championship leader, his race is already compromised from lap 1. As we see now, we have a three-way battle for P8. As we see an Aston Martin, that's Baby Shumi recovering from a spin in Sector 2. Well, yeah, that just shows us the rain is definitely having an effect now. The conditions are getting quite tricky. But maybe we're going to see some drivers pitting for the intermediates now. But most of the drivers are staying out. But Dungeon actually coming into the pit lane, he's pitting for the inters. Are any of the other drivers going to make the same decision as well? I don't think they are. We saw Moto going past the pit lane there. So yeah, this could be quite a strategy gamble for Dungeon. But let's see, will his gamble pay off? Jerry Pecco now coming into the pit lane for the intermediate tyres. He's pitting a lap later than everyone else, as we see Dungeon now coming past the pit lane ahead of Jerry. But is Jerry going to get out ahead of Wyside? No, he's not. Wyside now passing Jerry, and I think Jerry's actually lost time to Wyside. So Jerry's call to stay out a lap longer definitely didn't pay off, but Dungeon's gamble to pit a lap earlier has worked perfectly for him. Jerry now looking to make his way back past Wyside. The gap was 3 seconds after he made his pit stop, and he's closed that gap right up now. And coming through the first 3 corners, you can see how much Wyside's struggling as he gets a huge snap of oversteer on the exit. But that's allowed Jerry to get up into P2, and Jerry's now going to be setting his sights on Dungeon up in P1. But Dungeon has built over a 10-second gap to P2, so Dungeon absolutely flying in these conditions right now. But the rain is increasing more and more. It's getting easier and easier to make a mistake, so Jerry still definitely has a chance of getting the win. Dungeon's gap has come all the way down to just under 4 seconds. I have no idea what happened to him. He must have made a mistake, got a track limit penalty or something. But Dungeon now coming into the pit lane, he's going onto the wet tyres, and Jerry's staying out for one more lap. So you see Wyside coming in as well. Is anyone else going to come into the pit lane? I think Moto is coming in. So Jerry is taking a gamble this time as well, staying out an extra lap. It's definitely going to be tricky on those old intermediate tyres, but we're just going to have to wait and see who made the right strategy call. Now coming out of the pit lane, Jerry Pecco on the wet tyres, and he's actually come out ahead of Wyside, and he's made quite a gap to him too. So Jerry has pulled off a bit of a strategy masterclass there, but if he wants to get his first ever win here in AWC, he's going to have to fend off Wyside for the rest of the race. Coming into the stadium section, Wyside's actually crashed, and he's now out of this race. This would have been a great opportunity for him to gain some ground in the Drivers' Championship, but he's now going to be walking away with 0 points. The rain now lightening up, all the drivers coming into the pit lane for the intermediate tyres, but Jerry, he pitted a lap earlier than Dungeon, trying to get the undercut on him, but it hasn't worked out too well for him, because Dungeon is still in P1 ahead of Jerry. But we saw how good Dungeon is in these conditions earlier on in this race. He had over a 10-second gap to Jerry, and he's going to need to replicate that performance if he wants to stay in the lead and take his first win. And now coming out of turn 3, Dungeon actually takes a track limit penalty there, and that's going to open the door for Jerry Pecco to get back up into P1. And now all Jerry Pecco needs to do is keep up the pace and keep his nose clean if he wants to stay ahead of Dungeon. And that's a Mercedes who's crashed, and that's Heya. I think Heya had the same issue as he did on lap 1, but he's now out of this race for good. But yeah, both championship contenders are now out of the Mexican Grand Prix. It's been a long time coming for Jerry Pecco. For the first time in 3 seasons, Jerry is going to cross the line in first place. Jerry wins the Mexican Grand Prix. And Dungeon finally gets his first podium of the season, but the battle for P3 is not over just yet, as through the penultimate corner they go. Beastova actually loses positions with meters to go, but Beast takes a shorter run down to the line, but it's Moto who just narrowly beats him out for the final podium position. A sensational first win for Jerry here in Mexico, and by doing so he moves up into P4 in the Drivers' Championship ahead of Beastova, and he's now only 6 points away from Moto, so Jerry could be looking at making his way up into the top 3.